Hi there, folks. My name is Tom Landa, and I'm with a group called Locarno, based here in Vancouver, British Columbia, home of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish nations. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about where I'm from, where I currently live, and also a little bit about our music and about Locarno. Locarno is actually named after, partly named after a beach here in Vancouver, but the music that we play is very much rooted in Mexican music and different Mexican musical idioms. We also play music from other parts of Latin America, but it really focuses on Mexican music. And part of the reason that for that is that I was born and raised in Mexico City, and I moved to Canada in my teens. And when I first moved to Canada, I was delighted. I was 15 years old when I moved, and I was really excited and delighted to be in this new country. And I worked hard at fitting into my new culture, and I was also starting high school when I came to Canada. So there was already an immense pressure to fit in grade 9, but there was also an immense pressure just to fit into my new culture, which I did. I really took to it like a duck to water, as my mom would say. And what that also meant is that little by little I started putting parts of me away, like the Mexican parts of me, in a little compartment. And eventually I stopped speaking Spanish at home. I stopped being as interested in things to do with Mexico. I lost touch with a lot of people from Mexico that I had been in touch with. And, by the time I was in 19 or in my early 20s, I pretty much was Canadian and had, in a way, abandoned Mexico and my Mexican culture. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I rediscovered my Mexican culture and got back in touch with my Mexican roots. And it was through music. And I'm very grateful to that. I always think of music as a gift. And so I'm very grateful to music. And in this case, it was from a Mexican-American band called Los Lobos, based out of East LA. They made a record called La Pistola y el Corazón, where they explored different Mexican songs from different regions of Mexico. So it was all-encompassing and really also focused on some son jarocho. And I immediately fell in love. All those sounds that I was hearing on that record were in some ways foreign, but also very, very familiar. Some of them I would have heard at home. Some of them they would have been around when I was growing up in Mexico, or I heard them at parties. A lot of traditional music from Mexico, and I fell in love with it. And through that record, and through me identifying through that record, I rediscovered my Mexican roots and got in touch with my Mexican heritage. And it began a journey of me going back to Mexico, speaking Spanish again, prioritizing, that part of my life, and making sure that I was as equally proud Canadian as I was equally proud Mexican. And so I started going back to Mexico, and it eventually led me to getting a Canada Council grant to study son jarocho in Veracruz, Mexico. And when I came back to Canada, I started the project Locarno, which is, as I mentioned, based here in Vancouver. And I can safely say that place, like where I come from, but also where I currently live and where the band resides, very much influences the music that we play. All the musicians that I have an honor to share the stage with are all based here in Vancouver or the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. We've done extensive touring throughout British Columbia. And, a lot of us cut our teeth, so to speak, playing here in BC and in Vancouver. So who we are and where we come from and where we live has had an immense impact on the music that we create. And so that, coupled with also where our roots are from, and in this case Mexico, and also for Pedro, who's the guitar player for Mexico. So it's we are a product of where we come from, and we have deep respect for our traditions and where we come from, and deep respect for also the place where we live, for the Indigenous people of British Columbia, who we play in their land and share music with them. And so really, Locarno is really a mixture of all those things, and in the place where we come from. I also like to think of us as being part of Cascadia, which is, an idea of the whole West Coast from Alaska to Mexico being one. And I really feel that music obviously is a unifying force, but not to sound too hippie, but sometimes I feel like, music is a unifying force. And at the end of the day, we have way more similarities and things that brings us together than things that separate us. So really, Locarno is about celebrating my culture, celebrating the culture of the people in the band and the place where we come from and the place where we live. And yeah, I just thank you for listening and hope we see you down the road.